Right, it was a big weekend for the country. South Africa celebrated 30 years of democracy. And of course, as we did that, questions have been raised about the country's progress and where it's headed. Some have even sought to draw comparisons between the apartheid era and the current constitutional government due to poor service delivery, among a host of other challenges. Of course, the question that remains is whether our democracy has matured enough to rise above some of these challenges. Well, to answer this question and really reflect on where we are as a country, we are joined in studio by struggle stalwart and activist, Mr. Jay Naidoo. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Naledi, and good morning to your listeners.
It is absolutely great to have you in studio. I think you're one of the voices that we don't hear. I might argue for myself that we don't hear enough from in the country, and I think you've got a lot to contribute, obviously. I thought to myself, just to start the conversation, for those young ones that don't know, that essentially you are the founding General Secretary of COSATU in 1985 up until 1993, and then had the massive responsibility post-1994 to be in cabinet, in former President Nelson Mandela's cabinet, with the massive responsibility of overseeing how we write and implement the Reconstruction and Development Programme. Those are two very, very big responsibilities and massive contributions. As you reflect on how important those tasks were for you, what was your sense then on the 27th of April this weekend, 30 years on? Do you feel that all that work that you put in that period is reflected in the country you see today? Let's start there.
Well, Naledi, your introduction compared the moment we face today as whether it reflects on whether we won the struggle against apartheid. And let me say to those young people that have been born in the last 30 years that nothing should ever want us to go back to that time. I was 4 years old when we were evicted from our home because we were the wrong color on the wrong side of the street. And 3.5 million of our people were brutally uprooted in that way. So no one wants to go back to that, where your entire life, and particularly me as a young person, started to believe the untruth that I was lesser than a white person. We don't want to go back there. But reflecting on the last 30 years, I think there is no doubt in anyone's mind, including those in power, that we could have been much further down the road of delivering the covenant we signed with our people to deliver a better life to our people. And as I reflect on that, particularly because I am living in the Magaliesburg, I am living close to Marikana, what I see is the devastation of an ecological catastrophe in a mining development that was born in our democracy but is replicated all the apartheid spatial planning and left our people completely exposed and underdeveloped and at the mercy of both legal and illegal mining that is now destroying our land, destroying our water supply, and this biosphere, which is a World Heritage Site. A World Heritage Site because it contains the cradle of our humanity. This is where the first life form in the entire planet started, billions of years ago. And yet today, mining and the type of unrestrained type of agricultural development is eating into this monumental treasure of the world. So I think there is much to talk about in terms of the type of political representatives we want to elect and whether they have in them the courage and the political will to serve our people and serve our people's needs for a clean and healthy and safe environment. Yeah. And that's the question we should be asking as we walk into the voting stations.
And not only are we walking into the voting stations, but this week we're also walking towards May Day on Wednesday, where we celebrate the workers of our nation. And part of the work in even establishing the COSATU back in the 80s was to speak particularly for the working class. Has this government in 30 years taken enough care of the working class, the man at the bottom that is able to contribute something to the country, but doing so with a lot on their back? Have we done enough for them? And perhaps we can speak about particular unions, or just, you know, from a policy point of view, what we need to improve about the lives of the working class that keep this country going.
Well, last week I saw the newspaper that 4,000 miners were being retrenched in one of the mining companies. Today there's another 4,000 at stake. So when we talk about the beneficiaries of our mining resources, of our land, of our economy, I think the working class is still missing in action. If one looks at the statistics on joblessness, we're practically a country that is largely unemployed. We have an underclass in this country. Now, we had an underclass in the 80s and the 70s, but the underclass that we were part of had a mission, we had a cause. The goal was freedom. We were prepared to die for our freedom, and many did. And some of these politicians should remember that. And if we look today and we say, what is the hope, the pathway of hope and opportunity are we creating for these young people? The first instance, our entire education system has collapsed. If 60% of young people coming out of 12 years of education have very few skills, no job, and unlikely to have a job, then that's not a good story to tell. At the same time, one must understand that the world economy has changed. That technology, as you are sitting here talking to me, has changed.
Absolutely.
The way it's changed the production line. The old concepts of collective bargaining have fallen by the wayside. We've got to start thinking of new diversion strategies. And the biggest job creator I see in this country is actually agriculture. But how can you have agriculture if we're not training people to become farmers? Not gentlemen farmers who are given land but no resources and extension services. I live in this area of the Northwest, which is the food basket of Africa, of South Africa. It feeds 15 million people. But large numbers of these farms have been abandoned. Why is our government not buying these farms and training young people to run them from our townships? Every person has the full potential to reach any aspiration they want to. That was the demonstration of how, during apartheid, migrant workers who were the backbone of the union movement, and the union movement, which was the backbone of the freedom struggle, never take that away from the people of this country. At the end of the day, all people like me, or including our president, did was hold the microphone for people on the ground. The notion that our country was freed by leaders is nonsense. Our country was freed because our people stood up and refused to collaborate in their oppression. And what I'm saying to our people today, we have to stand up and speak truth to power, organize ourselves, and win back our democracy and our covenant that we had with government in 1994 to deliver a better life to our people.
Are you optimistic that we're able, we took your coffee away, we'll give it to you in a moment. Are you optimistic, Mr. Naidoo, that we would be able to do that as a country? I think about, again, and I like to make this example of just your contribution in the time that you spent, of course, in the leadership of our country. At the time, former President Nelson Mandela put this massive weight on your shoulders that it was, well, you then deliver the Reconstruction and Development Programme, the RDP program, and after that, it was essentially a program that would bring some sort of transformation to the country, build houses, give people education, and resolve some of the massive problems that government met in 1994. That program didn't last very long, did it?
Yes. Now, let's answer the question.
Right. What have we done wrong? Is the lack of continuity where we've gone wrong?
It's choices we make. In 1996, 2 years after democracy, the design and the redesign of a system of apartheid that was there to meet the needs of a minority of people had to be redesigned in order to build out the idea that now everyone is equal. Now, to redesign a system like that would take you years. To be able to involve a consultative process in which people were able to participate in a people-centered development of how they want to live their lives. It had to have design, it had to have the resources. We had inherited a bankrupt country, and it had to have the right partnerships and capacity in government to deliver. Now, when the RDP, which won us a landslide victory in 1994, was closed, there was not even a discussion in the NEC of the ANC, or in the alliance, or with me, or with anyone in the cabinet. Someone behind the scenes made a political choice that the RDP represented too much of a radical transformation of our country, because the RDP did not talk about black economic empowerment in the sense that politically connected people will be able to benefit from the largess of democracy and the democratic dividend. It was about how workers in the factory would negotiate what the RDP meant there, or farm workers with their farmers on a farm. At every level of society, there was going to be transformation, and with transformation, inclusion, and with inclusion, the development of the new parameters, the new pathways of hope and opportunity. That was shut down. And it's not me that should answer that question. There are others.
Yeah. What do you then say about where we are in terms of public participation? And just even the wording that we use and the sort of, you know, the policies that we put in place. At some point, we were talking about the National Development Plan and so many. I think at that point, what I saw anyway was that South Africans just didn't engage with you know, the policy direction that South Africa was taking.
Yes,
so talk to me about that, whether or not in your era that was something that was real, that South Africans believed in the ideas that were being put forward to them, and do you think that that's happening today?
Let me give you an example of in the union movement. We were not allowed as an organizer to go and meet the employer on your own. You had to have shop stewards. And both the organizer and the shop steward could not meet the management unless they had a mandate from workers, unless they gave a report back. The design of the rules of consultation are absolutely explicit. They mean we need to be talked to. Now, in the Magaliesburg, there is a company that wanted to build a smelter not far from where we live. Now, we know a smelter produces very toxic chemicals, which could travel up to 20 kilometers. I'm living 5 kilometers. They say there was consultation, and they had what was, I think, a ridiculous attempt at consultation until we challenged them. And they've had to now account. And this is an international company that was doing the consultation, but it was a cut and paste job. And this is what's happening across our country today. Consultants have been the main beneficiaries of government funding around consultation. Yet communities are barely touched by the consultation process. So here we see a continual demonstration at the type of consultation which really does not smack of anything close to what we thought and we actually issued as guidelines on consultation. So again, it's up to us as people to organize ourselves. Across the Magaliesburg biosphere, we are building an alliance of farmers and farm workers, of communities, of unemployed youth, of tourism businesses, of every type of NGO, because we believe ultimately there has to be a negotiation with the mining sector, with the government, with the municipality, with the provincial authorities.
And the communities. We were speaking earlier with my colleague around social labor plans and just how the
exactly, because mining regime changed fundamentally in 1994. All mineral resources belonged to the state held in trust for the people. You get a license to then mine. And the most important part of that license is a social license about what is the benefits, the social benefits, the employment benefits, right, the enterprise benefits that flow to communities. Absolutely. And to workers. None of that is observed today.
And unfortunately, we're bleeding jobs. I wish we had more time, and it really has flown, Mr. Naidoo. I want to wrap up with one last question. Again, we reflect on 30 years of democracy. Around this time, 30 years ago, you had a country that was changing because of electoral reform, changes to how it votes. We've got electoral reform taking place this year as well. You've got independent candidates. You've got so many new entrants into the political sphere, and seemingly some of the big players being weakened, at least according to the polls that are forecasting what's coming. Are you happy with the options that South Africans have? What do you make of what do you expect that we're able to see, if at all, on the 29th of May?
The electoral reform was supposed to be done after the first 5 years, because a proportional system puts all power in the hands of the people, the bosses of political parties. And I've seen that. I've seen political parties in the Platinum Belt who are removing MPs because they talk too much about what mining is doing to them. So what I believe is that the first step of this is, of course, the right of independence to stand. There are good people in all political parties, and I ask the electorate, ask them the tough questions. Do you live in our community? Are you prepared to, do you have a track record in our community? When you get to Parliament, are you prepared to consider and vote for and fight for the reduction of the size of the cabinet, the reduction of the wages of politicians in this country? These are important demands, and I think votes cannot be given in exchange for a free T-shirt or a free lunch. A vote is something that many generations have fought for. Many generations have given up their lives for. Respect that vote, respect that contribution of your ancestors who are watching us today. They are watching us very closely, not just black ancestors, white ancestors, because they want our country to heal. They want us to work together. And any politician that continues to cause this type of division between races, between groups, between political parties, is not worthy to be part of a democracy of South Africa, which was a miracle in itself going forward.
Yeah. This was an eye-opening discussion, and we really have appreciated your contributions. That there, Mr. Jay Naidoo, he is the founding General Secretary of COSATU, and of course, a former minister who served on the very first cabinet of our democratic South Africa, speaking to us about where we are as a country 30 years on and what's expected of us moving forward. Still to